Hey guys, Mr. Herzberg here. It is Wednesday, April 22nd. You know what Wednesdays mean. Time for some Fahrenheit 451, going over our homework from Monday night and our journal. So let's get started. The journal today deals with analogies. Analogies are like short sayings meant to clarify or explain. If you have this conversation here, cheer up, John said to Wanda. After Ken broke up with her, you'll find someone else. How can I? Wanda wailed. Ken was perfect for me, John. Oh, you know, Wanda, there's plenty of fish in the sea. Well, that little expression, there's plenty of fish in the sea, that's an analogy that means there's all tons of people out there, you'll find someone else, right? Okay? So analogies just explain something by using other words to explain it. Today in these exercises, you're going to be using these analogies to explain what's happening in the situation. So we've got two situations here, and your job is going to be explain in 2 or 3 sentences what the analogy means and how it ties into that particular situation. So for the one we just did as an example, you could say there's plenty of fish in the sea is the other character basically saying in so many words that it's okay, you'll find someone else to cheer up the other person, okay? So that's all you're going to do is you're going to make a connection with the analogy to kind of glue it all together. The analogy holds together the situation. All right? Cool. And that's our standard for this week, by the way. Reading informational text, 8.3. Inform, persuade, or entertain. Which one of the 3 we're informing this week, okay? So let's get started next. We are going to go over our questions from Monday night. So, what does Montag do to the Bible to try and get Faber to agree to help? Well, Montag is going to try to memorize and make copies of the Bible to get Faber to help. He says, we won't destroy it, but we've got to protect this, okay? What does Faber give Montag to help him out with his meeting with Beatty? A little earbud to hide in his ear. It's such a small, little earpiece. It's going to go all the way in so no one else can see it. And it'll be like Faber's way of keeping up with Montag, like whispering things in his ear to try and handle their plan. Okay, describe the bank. The bank is a place where it's not like banks are nowadays. It's all digital, and it's very cold. Not a whole lot of people exchanging money. It's a very sort of mechanical robot type of environment. Describe the show that Mildred and her friends are watching. It's a show about clowns. It's violent. It's insane. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just mindless entertainment. What does Montag do to the parlor walls? He walks in right in the middle of Mildred and her friends at a little season premiere party for this new show, and he cuts the switch and kills all the TVs and cuts them off right in the middle of them watching. I kind of like that move. It's very bold. What does Montag what questions does he begin to ask the ladies? Well, he starts asking them about politics and their feelings and what are they doing? Do they really like this? He starts basically getting them to question their lives. It's kind of cool, actually. What happened to Gloria's husband? She says that he is off and that they all start talking about the way they had their kids. They say that they all had cesarean sections and that they're not even interested in their kids. That's more of I guess they felt like they had to do it. And Gloria says her husband is no longer with her. It's very, very kind of surface level. You get to see that these women that are hanging out with Mildred are just like her. How did Mrs. Bowles have 2 children, cesarean section, she says, that we put her under, and they took the kids like that. Because she said she doesn't like pain, and why should she have to deal with pain? What were Mrs. Bowles' reason for having children? She said that she wanted kids because it felt right, but it was more of a necessity to her, so much so. Her way of parenting is awful. She hands off her kids onto other people. It's very hands-off. She lets other people do the work for her. How did the women vote? What did they use for the criteria when voting for president? They always voted for someone they said they liked the person's personality or the way that they looked. They didn't even care about the viewpoints or the politics. What is the name of the poem Montag reads, and I'm going to go ahead and open that up here for you, and that is right here. It's called The Sea of Faith, and it's right here. It's 1, 2, 3 stanzas long right there. He reads it to the ladies, and he even starts making some of them cry as he reads it. Very, I liked the way Montag he just got tired in this part of our reading and just decided he was not going to put up with the nonsense and the fakeness anymore. And he sort of goes out and comes out on his own. So let's get started now, right after on page 97, right after he gets done reading the poem. And Mrs. Phelps begins crying. And we're going to go from pages 97, and I only want you to read to the very end of part 2, funny enough, 106. So 97 to 106, okay? Let's get started. Mrs. Phelps was crying. The others in the middle of the dessert watched her crying grow very loud as her face squeezed itself out of shape. They sat, not touching her, bewildered with her display. She sobbed uncontrollably. Montag himself was stunned and shaken. "Shh, shh," said Mildred. You're all right, Clara. Now, calm down, Clara. Snap out of it. What's wrong, Clara?" "Oh, said Mrs. Phelps. "I don't know. I don't know. Mrs. Bowles stood up and glared at Montag. "You see, I knew that's what I wanted to prove. I knew it would happen. I've always said poetry and tears, poetry and suicide and crying and awful feelings, poetry and sickness, all that mush. Now I've had it proven to me. You're nasty, Mr. Montag. You're really nasty." Faber then replied to Montag, "Now." Montag felt himself turn and walked to the wall slot, dropped the book in through the brass notch to the waiting flames. "Silly words. Silly, silly words. Awful, hurting words," said Mrs. Bowles. "Why do people want to hurt people? It's not enough to hurt in the world. You gotta go tease people with poems and stuff like that?" Clara, begged Mildred, pulling her arm. "Come on now, let's be cheery. Why don't we turn on the family now and go ahead. Let's laugh and be happy and we'll stop crying. Let's go back to our party, our premiere party." "I don't want to," said Mrs. Bowles. "I'm trotting right straight home is what I'm doing. You want to visit my house and my family? Well, that's good. But I won't come in this fireman's crazy house again for the rest of my life." "Go home." Montag fixed his eyes upon her quietly. "Go home, and I want you to think about your first husband divorced, and your second husband killed in a jet, and your third husband blowing his brains out. Go home and think of the dozen abortions you've had. Go home and think about you and your damn cesarean sections too, and your children who hate your guts. Why don't you just go home and think of it all happened? What did you ever do to try and stop it? Go home. Go home," Montag yelled, "before I knock you down and kick you out my door." The door slammed to the house and then was empty. Montag stood alone in the winter weather, with the parlor walls the color of the dirty snow. In the bathroom, water was running, and he heard Mildred shaking sleeping tablets into her hand. "Fool, Montag, fool, fool, oh God, you silly fool." "Shut up!" He pulled the green bullet from his ear and jammed it in his pocket. It sizzled faintly. "Fool, fool." He searched the house and found the books where Mildred had stacked them from behind the refrigerator. Some were missing, and he knew that she had started on her own slow process of dispersing the dynamic in her house, stick by stick. But he was very angry now. Only exhausted and maybe a little bewildered with himself. He carried the books into the backyard and hid them in the bushes near the alley fence. For tonight, he thought, in case she decides to do any more burning. Montag went back through the house. "Mildred?" He called at the door of the darkened bedroom. There was no sound. Outside, crossing the lawn on his way to work, he tried not to see how completely dark and deserted Clarice McClellan's house was now. On the way downtown, he was so completely alone with his terrible error that he felt the necessity for strange warmness and goodness that came from a familiar and gentle voice speaking in the night. Already in a few short hours, it seemed that he had known Faber for a lifetime. And now he knew that he was two people, that he was, above all, Montag, who knew nothing, who did not even know himself, a fool, but only suspected it. And he knew that he was also the old man who talked to him, and talked to him as the train was sucked from one end of the night city to the other on a long, sickening gasp of motion. In the days to follow, and in the nights when there was no moon, and in the nights when there was only a very bright moon shining on the earth, the old man would go on with his talking, and this talking drop by drop, stone by stone, and flake by flake. His mind would well over at last, and he would not be Montag any more. Then this old man told him and assured him and promised him he would be Montag plus Faber, fire plus water, and then one day, after everything had mixed and simmered and worked away into silence, there would be neither fire nor water, but a wine. Out of two separate and opposite things, a third. And one day he would look upon the fool and know the fool. Even now he could feel the start of the long journey, the leave-taking, the going away from the self he had once been. It was good listening to the beetle hum, the sleepy mosquito buzz, and the delicate filigree murmur of the old man's voice, at first scolding him and then consoling him in the late hours of the night as he emerged from the subway toward the firehouse world. Pity, Montag, pity. Don't haggle and nag them. You were so recently of them yourself. They are so confident that they will run on forever, said Faber. But they won't run on. You see, they don't know that this is all one huge blazing meteor that makes a pretty fire in space. But someday, it'll have to hit. You see, Montag, they only see the blaze, the pretty fire, just as you once saw it. Montag, old men who stay at home afraid tending their peanut-brittle bones have no right to criticize. Yet you almost killed things at the start. Watch it. I'm always with you, remember that. I understand how it happened. I must admit that your blind raging invigorated me. God, how young I felt. But now, Montag, I want you to feel old. I want a little of my cowardice to be distilled in you tonight. The next few hours when you see your boss, Captain Beatty, well, tiptoed round him. Let me hear him for you. Let me feel the situation out. You know, survival is our ticket out of here. Forget the poor, silly women. I made them unhappier than they have been in years, I think, said Montag to Faber. You know, Faber, it shocked me to see Mrs. Phelps crying like that. Maybe they're right. Maybe it's best not to face things, but to run and have fun. I don't know. I feel so guilty. No, you mustn't, Montag. If there was no war, if there was some kind of peace in this world, I'd say fine, have your fun, right? But you can't go back to being just a fireman, Montag. All isn't well in this world. Don't you see? Montag perspired. Montag, are you listening? My feet. I can't move them. I feel so damn silly. My feet won't move. Listen, easy now, Montag, said Faber. I know, you're afraid of making a mistake. Don't. Mistakes can be profited by. Man, when I was younger, I shoved my ignorance in people's faces. They beat me with sticks, and by the time I was 40, my blunt instrument had been honed to a fine cutting point for me. See, if you hide your ignorance, Montag, no one will hit you, and you'll never learn. Now pick up your feet into the firehouse with you. We are twins. We're not alone anymore. We're not separated out in different parlors with no contact between. If you need help when Beatty pries at you, Montag, I'm going to be sitting right there with you in your eardrum, and I'm going to be making notes. Montag felt his right foot, then his left one move. Oh, man. Just promise me to stay with me. The mechanical hound was gone at the firehouse. Its kennel was empty, and the firehouse stood all about in plaster silence, and the orange salamander truck slept with its kerosene in its belly, and the fire throwers crossed upon its flanks. And Montag came in through the silence and touched the brass pole and slid it down in the air. Looking back at the deserted kennel, his heart beat, paused, and then beat. Faber was a gray moth asleep in his ear. For the moment, Beatty stood near the drop hole waiting, but with his back turned as if he were not waiting. Well, he said to the men playing cards, here comes a strange beast in which all tongues is called a fool. He put his hand to one side, palm up for a gift. Montag put the books in it. Without even glancing at the title, Beatty tossed the books into the trash basket and lit a cigarette. Who are a little wise, the best fools be. Welcome back, Montag. I hope you'll be staying with us now that, well, your fever's done and your sickness is over. You want to sit down for a hand of poker with us? They sat and the cards were dealt. In Beatty's sight, Montag felt the guilt of his hand. His fingers were like ferrets that had done some evil and now were never rested, always stirred and pick and hid in pockets, moving from under Beatty's alcohol-flamed stare. If Beatty so much as breathed on them, Montag felt that his hands might wither, turn over on their sides, and never be shocked to life again. They would be buried for the rest of his life and his coat sleeves forgotten. For these were the hands that had acted upon their own, no part of him. Here he was, where the conscience fest first manifested itself to snatch books, dart off with a job, and Ruth and Will Shakespeare, and now in the firehouse these hands seemed gloved with blood. Twice in half an hour, Montag tried to rise from the game to go to the latrine and wash his hands. When he came back, he hid his hands under the table, and Beatty would laugh. Montag, let's have your hands in sight. Now that we don't trust you, understand, but they all laughed. Well, said Captain B, you know the crisis is past and all is well. The sheep returns to the fold, Montag. We're all sheep who have strayed at times. Truth is truth, and to the end of this reckoning we've cried. You know they're never alone that are accompanied with noble thoughts. We've shouted to ourselves, sweet food of sweetly uttered knowledge. Sir Philip Sidney said that. But on the other hand, words are like leaves, you know. And where they are most abound, much fruit of sense beneath is rarely found. Alexander Pope. What do you think of that, Montag, huh? I don't know. Careful, whispered Faber, living in another world far away. Or this. A little learning is a dangerous thing, Montag. You drink deep or taste not the Pierian spring. There's shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking largely sobers us again. Pope. Same essay. Where does that put you, Montag? Montag bit his lip. I'll tell you, Beatty said. That made you for a little while a drunkard, huh? Read a few lines and off you go over the cliff. Bang! You're ready to blow up the world, chop off heads, knock down women and children, destroy all authority. I know. I've been there too. I've been through it all. No, I'm all right, said Montag nervously. Stop blushing. I'm not needing. Really, I'm not. You know, I had a dream an hour ago. I lay down for a cat nap, and in this dream, you and I. Montag got into a furious debate on books. You towered with rage, yelled quotes at me, and I calmly parried every thrust. Power, I said, and you quoted Dr. Johnson and said knowledge is more equivalent to force. And I said, well, Dr. Johnson also said, dear boy, that he is no wise man that will quit a certainty for an uncertainty. Stick with the fireman, Montag. All else is a dreary chaos. Don't listen to him, whispered Mr. Faber. He's trying to confuse you. He's slippery. Watch out. Beatty chuckled. And you said, quoting, truth will come to light, murder will not be hid long. And I cried in a good humor, oh God, he speaks only of his horse, and the devil can cite scripture for purpose. And you yelled, this age thinks better of a gilded fool than of a threadbare saint in wisdom's school. And I whispered gently, the dignity of truth is lost, with much protesting. And you screamed, carcasses bleed at the sight of the murderer. And I said, patting your hand, what do I give your trench mouth? And you shrieked, knowledge is power. And a dwarf on a giant's shoulder seized the furthest of the two. And I summoned my lip and my side with a serenity. The folk of mistaking metaphor for a proof, a torrent of verbiage, for a spring of capital truths, and oneself as an oracle is inborn in us, Mr. Valery once said. Montag Harold is sickeningly. He felt bitterly, unmercifully on brow, eyes, nose, and shoulders upfailing. He wanted to scream, "Now you shut up your confusing things and stop it." And Beatty's graceful fingers would thrust out and seize his wrist. God, what a pulse. I really got you going, don't I, Montag? Jesus, God. You know, your pulse sounds like the day after the war. Everything but sirens and bells. You may talk some more to you, Montag? I like your look of panic. You know, Swahili, Indian, and English literature. I speak them all. A kind of excellent dumb discourse, huh? Wiley. Montag, hold on, said Faber. He's muddying the waters. Oh, you were scared silly. I was doing a terrible thing and using the very books you clung to rebut on every hand and every point what traitor books can be, huh? You think they're backing you up, Montag? They're going to turn on you. Others can use them too, and then you're lost. Lost in the middle of the moor in a great welter of nouns, verbs, and adjectives, Montag. And at the very end of my dream, along I came with the salamander and said, "Going my way?" And you got in and we drove all the way back to the firehouse in beatific silence. All dwindled up to peace. Beatty let Montag's wrist go, let his hand slump limply into the table. All's well in the end, huh, Montag? All right, I'm going to stop there. We got a page and a half left. Captain Beatty is trying to take Montag's newfound intelligence he learned in literature and use it against him, kind of confusing. Luckily, he's got Faber in his ear in the hidden earpiece telling him, don't listen to him, he's trying to confuse you. And he's quoting literature, he's quoting scripture, he's doing all this to overwhelm Montag, to get him angry and to do something. And Montag's holding back because luckily he has Faber to help him. Okay? So stop, make sure you get to page, I think it's the end of part 2. Answer the questions. If you have any questions, come to my Google Meets from 2:30 tomorrow. Do your journal. I'll see you guys later.